I'm going to talk about SOFIA project, which is a project we're involved in. It's a streamlining of ocean waveform impact assessment. So I'll give an overview of this project, and then I'll maybe I'll concentrate a little bit then on one of the aspects of the project, which is ameliorating environmental monitoring barriers for wave energy developments. So the background to the SOFIA project. We all know wave energy is a nascent industry. It's developing. It's still a young industry. And as we mentioned earlier, there are many barriers, both technological and non-technological, to its progress. We were recently involved in another EU project called WavePlan, and two of the non-technological barriers that were identified by this project were the consenting process and environmental impacts, both the EIA process and monitoring requirements for wave energy farms. So the SOFIA project aims to look at whether this is the case, to see whether the consenting process and EIA are actually barriers to the consenting to wave energy. And then based on this, to provide recommendations for streamlining of approval requirements and impact assessment requirements for wave energy developments in Europe. And by doing this, it is hoped that we'll be able to ensure the protection of ecosystems and of stakeholder interests while simultaneously encouraging the development of the wave energy industry. There are four project pillars in the SOFIA project. The first one involves reviewing the barriers and accelerators in the consenting process for wave energy. And this was done by consulting with the wave energy industry, with those who have experience of going through the consenting process, and with regulators who have experience of consenting wave energy projects. So first of all, just did a catalogue of wave energy developments in the past, in the present, and those that are planned. And then we held some workshops with developers and had developer questionnaires to see what they thought of the consultation process at the moment, or the consenting process at the moment, and of environmental impact requirements. The second pillar was to review impact assessment data that has been collected at different wave energy test centres in Europe. It's mostly baseline data that has been collected so far at test centres. We did a review of the monitoring methodologies, and then we gathered the data from some of the test centres that have links with SOFIA project partners, and created a data repository known as the Data Management Platform, where you can access environmental data. And the last element of this was the creation of refined data products, which are methods of displaying environmental data that are hopefully understandable to stakeholders, to developers, to regulators. The third element then was to consult with stakeholders. Well, first of all, to identify what stakeholders are relevant to wave energy, and then to hold workshops with these stakeholders to see whether in the past they think their concerns have been addressed by the consenting process, and to see what other concerns they have about wave energy. And this again was done through questionnaires and through workshops. And the final pillar of the project is communication, which, just like any of the EU projects, is an important part. Dissemination, letting people know what lessons we've learned, and that we've done that. We're doing that through our website, through the project network, posters, events, and we'll have a final conference similar to this one. Today I'm going to look at the first two pillars. So a quick look at the review, a quick look at the barriers and accelerators to wave energy, and then a look at impact assessment data. So these are the barriers that have been identified in the consenting process, and I suppose an important caveat is that the wave energy industry is at a very early stage in the development in comparison to where it wants to go. There's very few devices have been put in the water, especially in comparison to the 2020 targets set by different member states for wave energy. And these barriers that have been identified are based on this limited experience. But I still think we can assume that these barriers will remain as the industry develops. There is a possibility that some of these barriers will become lessened as projects get bigger, but I think it's more judicious to assume that these barriers will remain. So the barriers we've identified are in three thematic areas. They're administrative procedures, environmental impacts, and human dimensions. The main problem involved with the administrative procedures for consenting wave energy projects is that they're overly complicated and they take too long. There's many different authorities involved in permitting in the maritime environment. These could be land-based, such as electrical connection, or it might be to do with leasing areas of the seabed. And these permits vary across all member states. So if a developer gets experience of the consenting process in one country, or gets experience of the administrative procedures in one country, he thinks he has it figured out, goes to a different country, realizes that it's a different story, he has to start all over again. In some member states, some permits cannot be applied for until others have been granted. So if there's a delay with one permit, it can lead to a delay, a very long delay in the whole project. And also there's a lack of fixed timeframes for processing applications, and this is likely to really put off investors. In terms of environmental impacts, there's inconsistency in the application of EIA across member states. In some European countries, an environmental impact assessment is required for small wave energy projects, whereas in other countries, for a project the exact same, an environmental impact assessment isn't required. Developers perceive that the EIA process is overly burdensome, especially considering that most developments at the moment only consist of one and sometimes very small devices. The effects of wave energy devices on the environment are unknown at the moment. Monitoring requirements are perceived as being too onerous, and in some cases monitoring requirements are perceived as being too vague. So perhaps an authority might tell a developer to see what effect the development may have on, for example, dolphins, but not actually give a duration of monitoring for the dolphins or give a method for monitoring the dolphins. And then the final thematic area is human dimensions, and this relates to conflicts with other maritime users. At the moment there's a lack of data as to how wave energy will affect other users such as fishermen, and there's a chance that mitigation measures will have consequences for the economic viability of projects. So mitigation measures may include giving compensation to, say, fishermen, or maybe moving the location of development to an area where the resource is not as good as had been in the first area. And this can put off investors also. And also there's a lack of strategic planning involving and integrating all uses in the marine space, in the maritime space. So I'm going to look at these parts of environmental impacts and the rest of the presentation. So I think some of the potential environmental impacts of wave energy, they're probably similar to the ones for tidal energy, which we heard of earlier. So there's the effect on coastal processes. What does extracting energy from waves, what effect does that have on sedimentation? Then there's the effect on benthos, which are the organisms living on or near the seabed. So this, perhaps laying the foundations for these devices can result in destruction of the habitats, or laying a cable on the seabed may create an artificial reef, which can maybe increase the population of certain species. There's the impacts on water quality. Marine mammals are probably one of the headline ones. The potential for noise from wave energy devices. Marine mammals use sound for communication, and there's a potential that the noise from wave energy devices will have an impact on this. There's also the potential for collision and entanglement in moorings, and same with birds, probably diving birds. There's potential for collision and entanglement in moorings, and with fish, there's a chance of attraction or collision. There's probably many more environmental impacts that I haven't considered here. And so an added complication is that the impacts are going to vary very much with the wave energy development. And this is complicated by the fact that at the moment there are hundreds, if not thousands, of wave energy devices out there, and no one knows yet which device is going to be, or if any of these devices are going to be the one to become common. We see here examples of a few. Wavestar, for example, the first one you see, it's got all its moving parts above the sea. It's piled into the ocean, whereas Pelamis, it's floating on the surface, and it'll have moorings to the seabed. This will be in 50 meters of water, whereas the Oyster, which is the next one you see, this will be in 20 meters of water, where the effects are going to be different. And this again is going to be on the seabed. The next one you see is Pico. This is on the will be on the coastline, so again the effects of this are going to be different. The next one you see is Ceto. This one is going to be in about 15 to 20 meters of water again, and this one will involve laying a high-pressure pipeline on the seabed, which again will have the different potential impacts. And the final one you see is Ocean Harvester, where you can see lots of complicated moving parts under the surface of the ocean, which will have potential for impacts with maybe fish or with marine mammals. And as well as this, the impacts are going to vary with the number of devices. They're going to vary over time. They're going to vary from site to site. Some impacts are going to be more important for some sites than others. And there's some impacts can perhaps be considered to be positive. So these farms will create probably no fish zones. So there's a chance that the population of fish in these areas will increase greatly. So the role of SOFIA, we're hoping to address the lack of understanding of impacts by accelerating the rate at which the understanding of impacts of wave energy developments is being obtained. So we're doing this by compiling and reviewing environmental monitoring data from wave energy test centers. So there's a good number of wave energy test centers that have been built throughout Europe. These have been built primarily to test and demonstrate the performance of wave energy devices. But there's also a lot of environmental monitoring going on at these test sites. And we've looked at the methodologies being used for environmental monitoring at these test sites and evaluated these methodologies and looked at the protocol for different monitoring. And we have data from a number of the test sites, the ones you see circled there, which we are compiling onto a data management platform, the data repository, which I spoke about and which I'll show you towards the end of this presentation. So, just as an example, so monitoring the effects on benthos. This is all baseline monitoring. These are just different examples of how it's done, how it can be done, and the large number of monitoring methodologies perhaps makes it confusing for regulators. It's going to be very difficult for regulators to specify which of these methodologies they require for a certain site. And again, these are just more examples of different ways to monitor for marine mammals. So the data management platform where we are compiling information, this is the first screen of it. There's 3 tabs. The first tab shows projects. So these are the different wave energy developments that have taken place in Europe. You can sort through them and get different pieces of information on these projects. The next tab shows the wave energy test sites in Europe. You can get information regarding what environmental impacts have been measured at these test centers, what stakeholders are relevant at these test centers, what regulators are in charge of consenting at these test centers. And the final tab then, it's a map tab, and this is where you can actually get the environmental data from different test centers in Europe. So I'll just show you some examples of environmental monitoring data which we have uploaded. The first example is at WaveHub near Plymouth. We have coastal morphology data. This is baseline coastal morphology data. The idea is that once a device is deployed there, that we'll have before and after, and you'll be able to compare. The results. The same with OceanPlug in Portugal. We have dolphin. We have a map of dolphin numbers off the coast of Portugal, and again, no devices have been deployed there. And the idea is that once devices are deployed there, we'll be able to do comparisons of before and after. And then finally, for the engineers, we have we've wave data from all the test centres. And I suppose it's not totally relevant to environmental monitoring, but all these test centres have wavebuoys deployed, so we were able to get the information, and since we had the chance, we have uploaded this information onto the data management platform. And this data management platform, it'll be available to anyone who wants to use it. You just need to sign up to it and create an account. And it'll also be possible for people to, if they have environmental monitoring data, it'll also be possible for them to upload this data and to share it. And I think by sharing this data is one of the ways which understanding of environmental impacts of wave energy will be enhanced, and the methodologies for monitoring impacts will be enhanced also. So just to finish up, the outputs from the SOFIA project, in the next 2 weeks, we're producing a document which has recommendations to be made on the amelioration of barriers related to consenting, and in the 3 key areas I mentioned. So they're administrative procedures, environmental impacts, and human dimensions. We'll be holding a workshop in Brussels where we'll be outlining these recommendations, first to the EU, and then we'll be outlining them to national authorities in Ireland after that. Later on, we'll be making recommendations towards the standardization of methodologies for environmental monitoring. And then the final point, the data management platform, which I showed you, that will be launched on the 23rd of April. And you'll be able to go to it at the address provided below. And as I said, if you want, you can upload your own data to that. And if you want any more information, it's available on this website. So thank you for your attention.